Don Anderson, 24, was a single father of a 4-year-old son, and they lived in the small town of Spanish Fork, Utah. In June 1984, his life would change when one evening he woke up to see grey aliens surrounding his son's bed. They were about to take his child away, but instead of taking aggressive action, he said, "I want to go with you, and know he'll be okay." It wasn't just the fact that he was seeing grey aliens, but he was shocked to find that he even knew one of them and felt comfortable in his presence. But why did he not fear them? The aliens agreed to his request, and they floated through the wall of the house and towards their spaceship. Don Anderson remained conscious throughout the ordeal and could not believe such things could happen. Don was able to look down onto his neighbours' houses, and in the distance he could see their craft sitting in a nearby field. They were then led into the craft and were greeted by a human-looking female wearing an orange and brown jumpsuit who guided them around the ship. Don's son was introduced to another small child about his own age, while they both ran down the corridor. Don noticed an archway to the side of him, and as he looked through it, he could see his son and the boy playing together. They were standing around what appeared to be a vertical shaft that went through the centre of the ship, which was surrounded by a catwalk. On the catwalk there was a device not unlike that of a shower nozzle. However, it did not emit water, but a stream of what looked like electric blue energy, and his son and the child were playing with the strange device. They each held it above their heads, where a stream of blue electricity flew down their body, making them laugh. Seeing his son was safe, he allowed her to lead him to another room, where she showed him an image of a woman. She told Don about other events in his life, which over time would come to pass. Short time later, Don and his son were escorted off of the craft and floated back to their home. After arriving back at the house, they were placed back into their respective rooms and immediately fell asleep. Unlike many other abductees, the following morning Don had remembered everything that had happened. The event had triggered something in his brain where he not only remembered this event, but he was now remembering others, stretching back to his actual birth. It was like having an NDE, except it was a UFO memory. It was experienced all the way up to and even before he was born. They all came into his mind. Everything that he believed up to this point in his life had been shattered. But who could he go to or talk to about it? Nobody would believe him. He decided to research everything he could on UFOs, but there was not enough books out there. He tried contacting the Center for UFOs, but they did not return his calls. He realized he was alone in this matter and had to do everything himself. About 6 months after the abduction, his son made his first friend, and to his amazement, it was the same child that he'd seen on board the spacecraft. They became the best of friends until the boy moved away. After everything that had happened, Don now had to deal with the flood of memories which had rewritten his life story. On looking back over his life, he realized there were numerous events that had hidden aspects that he had somehow forgotten or had denied at the time, or he had no explanation for. One of his memories was of a troll-like being which would regularly come into his room to try and abduct him. This memory went as far back as when he was 5 years old. The being looked ape-like with dark warty skin. It would enter his room at night and terrify him. It would come through the walls, and it got to the point when he actually knew when it was coming, and Don would pull the sheets up over himself, but the alien would pick him up and they would go through the walls before returning him to bed later that night. Afterwards, Don would wake up screaming, telling his mother the ape man had come and got him. His mother could do nothing and was beside herself. She obviously believed him, but could not work out what was going on. The first few abductions had her calling the police, but they found no evidence of intruders. How could they when they came through the walls? They visited the doctor, who found nothing wrong with him. Then after a month, everything stopped. Years later, he tried to discuss it with his mother, but she wouldn't talk about it. In 1970, when Don was 10, he and his friend Steve decided to camp in Steve's front yard. They later awoke to find everything eerily silent. Then strange orbs of light began flashing in the sky, and a huge spaceship appeared. They ran to wake up Steve's parents, but they were unable to wake them. Looking back, Don believed that he and his friend were abducted that night. In 1974, when he was 14, he believed he was abducted while walking in a canyon and remembered the inside of the spaceship. The screens on the craft looked to be ultra-high definition, like TVs today. Later, when he'd seen the diagram that whistleblower Bob Lazar had drawn when working at Area 51, they looked identical to what he'd seen in the spaceship. After his 1984 abduction, when he eventually realised he'd been in regular contact with extraterrestrials, he was now a different person and had dropped all religious beliefs and now had a whole new world view. He started to have out-of-body experiences along with other psychic events. A few years later, he and 2 other friends who were also abductees had amazing encounters aboard UFOs. They went camping in the mountains specifically to meditate and attract aliens. Later that evening, as they were talking, the clouds suddenly parted and a triangular spaceship appeared, and the temperature suddenly dropped about 20 degrees. Then tall, thin, dark figures appeared that looked like praying mantises. The figures were about 9 feet tall and approached their camp, but remained in the shadows. Don asked to see it, but it said no. He asked again, and this time it appeared behind him and touched his shoulder. Then a blue electric energy fell down his back. Now frozen, he asked to see him again, but he was told, "You are not ready to see us," and then vanished. Later that night, Don found himself walking along a dirt road and knew he was being guided by the aliens. Suddenly, a portal-like door appeared in front of him, and he walked through it. He was now aboard a UFO. The mantis-type creature was waiting for him. It was a long triangular ship with an orange ball in the middle. He found himself on a catwalk with a podium in front of it, with a little ball on top. He put his hand on the ball, and a large screen popped up. It showed his life events, both past lives and future lives. It was like experiencing deja vu. They walked to a large door, and there was a whoosh as it opened. They were now in another room. His body was scanned by a blue laser light, like it was cleansing him. He then walked into another room with a huge window that showed a bright field of stars. They were now looking into space. In the centre of the room was a kidney-shaped table surrounded by human-looking people. In the centre of the table was a large glowing orb. Someone said, "We've been waiting for you." Then a crystal ball glowed, followed by a stream of light that flowed out of the top of everyone, including Don. Energy appeared to swirl around like they were sharing things. The mantis took Don to another area where they were sitting on the top of the ship, and above them was a dome. Suddenly everything disappeared and Don found himself in the middle of the universe. There was no ship, just him. He was just floating by himself. Then a kind of musical note built up like the sound of the universe. It flowed through him and he could feel every cell in his body as it went through him. It was just him and the universe. Then he suddenly found himself back in the dome and then in his sleeping bag. His body was burning up and he was sweating. It took all night for his body to feel normal again. It came to pass that Don eventually met the woman that was previously told about on a UFO. She was not from the USA, and the meeting was very synchronistic, and they went on to have a long, loving relationship. Don was later harassed by the military and was told not to talk about his experiences. Instead, Don decided to go public and spoke at conventions. He later had a paranormal experience where he communicated with his deceased grandmother, where she related personal messages and knew about his military harassment. She'd been dead for 50 years. She told him he'd be fine, but the harassment eventually led to a heart attack. Whilst recuperating at home, he later found himself in a hospital-like healing centre where the aliens were helping him heal. In 2013, when Don was 53, he'd been suffering from a chest infection and feared he had pneumonia. One evening, he was meditating and an alien being appeared. It looked almost human with grey skin and long hair tied in a bun. It had piercing eyes with chiseled features and was wearing a silver jumpsuit with a strange emblem. He looked human, but his eyes were very different. He had a vial of pink liquid in his hand and he told Don to drink it. After that, the alien vanished. After drinking the liquid, he immediately felt better and his cold symptoms went away.